Hey everyone, Hudson here. Welcome to this week's Approaching the Scene. I got some fun stuff to cover this week. I want to talk about a little update that I've gotten on the Nikon Z6 and Z7 depth of field preview issue that I've highlighted in my video, Please Fix This Nikon. Got some cool news about that, and I want to give some kudos to everybody who reached out to Nikon about that. Talk about that in a minute. I want to talk about the new firmware version 2 update for those cameras, for the Z6 and Z7, and some testing that I've done. And I really do feel that autofocus tracking in continuous burst mode has gotten a whole bunch better. I'll show you some examples. I also want to talk a little bit about Mac's new big announcement that they're going to build a new version of the Mac Pro. It's been since 2013. A lot of people have asked me if I'm going to be upgrading to that. I've got the old 2013 Mac Pro trash can on my desk, and I've got to say, based on the announcement, I'm probably not. I'll talk about what kind of disappoints me about that. It's kind of onto that, do you need that new gear? And this, well, we'll talk about it. And then finally, I got kind of some fun stuff for those people who have Nikon's really cool lightweight 300 f4, the PF version. This is on my Nikon Z7 with an FTZ adapter. It's great on the DSLRs too. But when you're working on a tripod, I've always had a little bit of a problem with the Nikon collar and the Kirk collar that I've used, and Kirk came up with a solution for that makes using it on the tripod so much nicer. So stick around to the end. If you've got that lens, I'll show you something really cool. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about the depth of field preview issue. I don't want to go too deep into it. I'm going to put a link to that video, Please Fix This Nikon, in the YouTube description. If you just scroll down or hit show more, it's right there. But essentially the problem is that these cameras, through just kind of an oversight, I think, they're limited for autofocus purposes to not stopping down past f5.6 in live view, so they won't go to smaller apertures than f5.6. And the thing that they didn't allow us to do is to zoom in and preview. You can do a depth of field preview where you're looking at the whole image, either through the viewfinder or on the live view on the back, and hit a depth of field preview button and see exactly what the image is going to look like at your final aperture, but you can't zoom in at the same time. And that's something that I've done, I don't know, since the Nikon D800, the D800, the D810, the D750, the D500, the D850. When I'm in the landscape, I manually focus, I zoom in on the background, I make sure that it's acceptably sharp, I come back to the foreground, make sure it's acceptably sharp, maybe I stop down, maybe I choose to do focus stacking if not, but it lets me see really accurately what the sensor's seeing at my final aperture. And that's just something that in still mode you can't do with the Z6 and Z7. And I asked everybody to reach out to Nikon and see if they might fix that. It seems like an easy firmware update. And I got word back today, actually, from Nikon Professional Services that they've looked at it. Nikon USA, Nikon Professional Services for North America looked at it and said, yeah, this is a legitimate gripe, and they're sending the information on to Nikon Japan. They said they'd had a number of people asking about it, so kudos to everybody for reaching out. I really appreciate it. And they said they can't guarantee anything's coming anytime quickly or that anything will happen, but Nikon Japan has it. They've heard us, and if that firmware comes in the near future, I'll definitely update you, but I've got my fingers crossed. So good news that they're listening and that they reached out at least, so I feel really, really good about that. Second point is about the new firmware version 2.0 for these cameras, and those of you that have watched my videos in the past comparing them to the Sony mirrorless autofocus system or just my general complaints and grievances about this camera, anybody that's been following me knows I absolutely love using it in every situation except tracking fast action, because what happens is I really like to put my Nikon DSLRs in burst mode and use either autofocus, the flexible autofocus area with choosing which spot and letting it move around, or using group autofocus for erratically moving subjects, and just lay down bursts 10 frames a second with the D500. And with these cameras, in the original configuration, they tended to lose focus in the middle of those bursts, and you'd have a bunch of blurry images and you couldn't really tell. It was very difficult to get accurate focused shots. And firmware version 2.0 came out that added eye detect autofocus for portrait shoots. I've played with that. It seems to work really, really well. I haven't tested it extensively, but If you've got a relatively static subject, not a whole lot of motion, say you're doing a portrait shoot or a fashion shoot, the eyes all come up with little boxes and you can flip which one you want razor sharp and focus, and it'll just keep tracking it and focus, so all you have to worry is about composition and exposure. It's really, really nice. The autofocus tracking, oh, the other thing, it does low light autofocus better, and I have been in situations in low light where I see the low light autofocus come on. It moves a little bit slower with the autofocus, gets a really refined, accurate autofocus and locks in. So that's something you can turn on and off. It seems to work really well. Low lit landscapes and things, really, really nice. The sports action wildlife autofocus tracking burst mode, that's the game changer that I was looking for. And so I'm going to just show you some images. I'm here in Lightroom, and I took my kids to we've got kind of a carnival here in Portland, the Rose Festival. It's an annual big festival, and they have tons of carnival rides and things like that. And my little 3-year-old Pike and my little 2-year-old Pepper, well, she turns 2 in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now, had never been on rides. So I put them on this ride. This is one of these little rides that's like a starship, and it goes up and down. If Pike pulls that little yoke, it goes up. If he pushes it in, it goes down. And they're going in a circle, you know, relatively fast. It's a little kid's ride. But, you know, it's close quarters, changing light. Some of it's in shade, some of it's not in shade. One of the things they promised was that the fast, continuous autofocus mode in these cameras would now start doing auto exposure. Before, it would only lock in on the first exposure if you were in the fastest mode. So here I am with the Nikon Z7 using a 300mm fixed lens, the PF lens, in kind of tight quarters. It's almost like photographing birds in flight. You know, I have just a second to lock onto them. They're moving fast. They're going behind the structure of the thing. They're popping back out the other side. And I'm laying down bursts. I started with 5-round bursts, and I was having a little bit of trouble with it. This is the last ride that they went on when I really started getting it nice and figured out. And I went to high-speed, continuous, extended. So I'm in the mode that I've chosen to work with in this camera is for doing fast action is not dissimilar to what I would use with my DSLR. It's autofocus continuous mode, so it doesn't ever lock focus. And then I've got, for an area, dynamic autofocus area. So I've chosen a point, I tag that, say on Pike's head as the ride comes around, and then I just hold down the button, and if he moves off of that in composition, the points will start passing that around. It'll keep that subject that you locked in focus tracked. So that's what I'm using right here. And it's just, and I chose to go into the extended because at the low mode on the Nikon Z7, it's 5 frames a second. I think standard high speed on both the Z6 and the Z7 is 5 frames a second. If you go into extended high speed mode on the Z7, it's 8 frames a second for 14-bit, which is what I'm shooting right here. 9 frames a second if you drop to 12-bit. And with the Z6, I think it's 9 frames a second in 14-bit and 12 frames a second in 12-bit. So you get more of a boost with the Z6. I chose to use the Z7 for this because it's more demanding. We'll see how razor sharp and in focus some of these are. And it's a little bit slower handling, a little rougher to use in situations like this. So I just wanted to really test how good is the new system. And I think as you're looking at this, it really didn't miss focus much at all by the time I got it worked out. Now, granted, some of the earlier rides that the kids were on, it's a little bit different than new firmware. I'm more used to using my DSLRs for this stuff. The kids are there's one where it's a little bit off right there. But for the most part, you know, I'm just showing you straight out of the camera, no cropping, no sharpening. These are straight up raw files coming out of the Z7. It did a really nice job. So let me go in here and jump to just the favorites that I have, and let's check focus. I've rendered 100% previews for these. You take a look, you know, this is 46 megapixels. And I haven't gone, these are actually just my selects for being favorites. This one isn't perfect. It's close enough that I'm happy with it. The rest of them, man, oh man, we are talking sharp. Here's another reason to love that 300 PF lens. This one isn't razor sharp, but neither one of them were turned toward me. His hair's sharp enough. I just liked the composition. I liked that he was reaching back and checking on his sister. Made me happy. So that's like Dad's favorite. But I think if you look through these, you get the idea. I mean, you can't ask for it to nail focus much better than that. So has the autofocus performance in burst mode improved? Absolutely. Hell yes, it's improved. Is it as good as the Nikon D5? Well, you know, I still think it's close. It's still a little bit easier to track. I mean, this is tough stuff, photographing this close a quarter, that tight 300 millimeter lens in burst mode, and I feel like it did a really good job. I wouldn't hesitate to take this to a sporting event, to take this out to photograph wildlife. If I had the D500 sitting next to the Z6 in the bag, I'm probably going to shoot with the D500. It's just a little bit smoother feeling. Pop, 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 pop. This has a little stuttery feel. It takes a little getting used to. But honestly, some of it's just getting used to. And I believe it, maybe with another couple firmware updates, it'll get even better. Is it as easy to use as the Sony? No. I will be dead honest about it. When I photographed with the Sony A9 and the A7R III, you know, you hit the button to lock on a subject, it draws this little pulsating green box around the subject and it travels around the screen with that subject and you know it's locked. It's just easier to use. And I think Nikon will get there. The good news is if you're a person who's been shooting with Nikon DSLRs, this is a much more familiar feeling. It's way less of a letdown when you're shooting in burst mode. And you can see the results can be really, really quite good. So I think they've come a long ways in one update. I hope they continue to update both the Z6 and the Z7 and make them even better. But this is really, truly not bad. I'm going to talk really fast before I talk about the Mac Pro to kind of wrap things up. I'm going to talk about this cool little adapter that I can just foresee people asking me about that Kirk Enterprise Solution makes. And I guess the problem for those of us that have this 300 PF Nikon lens, it's a really lightweight, great little tool. It's smaller and lighter than my 70-200 2.8. But one of the problems with it is it has this lens collar that's just sort of clamped around the outside. It actually doesn't even come with a lens collar. When you buy it from Nikon, you can buy an additional Nikon lens collar. I've used that one. I've used the Kirk one that you can buy for it. I like the Kirk one because it's a little lighter weight and it just comes with a built-in foot that has an Arca Swiss dovetail for being clamped. The problem with either of them, though, is that the lens has enough weight hanging off the front that when you loosen it to spin vertical or horizontal to flip which orientation you're working with the lens with, it kind of rocks forward. It gets a little bit loose when you loosen the clamp to spin. And what Jeff Kirk did was design this really cool little gadget to go on his foot. So this is a kind of an additional thing. You buy the Kirk Foot, which is this whole collar assembly, and then there's this little clamp piece that you can get that has these two rollers, and it's all adjustable. They're really nicely made. And what they essentially do is you adjust those so they sit on the lens and they hold its weight. And when it rotates on two little rollers. So everything feels nice and tight when you loosen this. There's no forward give, which is just awesome. So if you want to look at the whole thing off the camera, this is the Kirk collar for the Nikon 300 PF. And I'll link this both on my ATS links page and on the YouTube video as well. But you just, that collar, and then this piece is an additional piece that just fits on the foot. I don't want to take it off because I've got it all adjusted. It takes about 2 minutes to adjust. To read the instructions, it's really dead simple. But that just clamps on the outside of the lens. So a really nice thing for those of you that have that and have maybe been frustrated with that issue where it just feels a little bit loose. It's tough to lock down when it's on the tripod. All right, so let's talk for 1 second about the Mac Pro that was just announced this week, the new cheese grater. To me, I welcome the fact that they're building a large expandable PC-like tower structure where you can add in different video cards and RAM configure. You can customize it and it can grow with your needs and it can be upgradable through time. That's what I was kind of hoping for when I bought the trash cam Mac in 2013. And they often kind of use this euphemism, they built themselves into a thermal corner. Well, for my purposes, that computer's worked really well from 2013 till now, where we're midway through 2019. I bought the base configuration for, I don't think it was $3,000. And over the years, I've doubled its hard drive from 256 up to 512 with a solid state drive through Otherworld Computing. I've added more RAM through Otherworld Computing to where I have 64 gigabytes of RAM. You know, I'm probably $4,000 into this computer, and it's rendering 4K video well, working well. It's a little long in the tooth. It's a bit slow doing some of the video work I do. You know, I can see it getting older, and I've been excited about what they're going to announce for the new Mac Pro. They've been saying 2019 is the year of the new Mac Pro. Well, they made this announcement this week, and you know, people always joked about the old cheese grater Macs. The new one really does look like a cheese grater. It's clearly been designed to kind of make a joke about the cheese grater ethos. You can put wheels on it to roll around the studio. I suppose there's applications where that could be cool. In most cases, I don't see a need for that. You could always get a cart. They designed a monitor. The problem I have with it, I guess, the biggest problem I have with it is that it comes in its base configuration at $6,000, and it still has the same 256 gigabyte solid state hard drive internal that the old 2013 Mac Pro came with, you know, and the price has doubled since 2013, but I would still need to upgrade that hard drive just like I just did. It comes with 32 gigabytes of RAM, but it comes with them on 4 8 gigabyte sticks. Now there's a lot of slots for RAM, but as you upgrade RAM into the future, you're probably going to do away with those 8 gigabyte sticks to put bigger sticks in down the road. So it just winds up being, in the base configuration, more expensive than I was hoping, personally, as you know, I'm a person who uses the heck out of my computer doing video and doing stills work, but you know, I was hoping for something in the $4,000 range. Well, maybe $5,000. I know the iMac Pro is $5,000, so maybe even if it was going to be more than $5,000, at least spec it in a way that someone like me would be happy to use it right out of the box and not need to upgrade to, you know, 64 gigs of RAM and double the hard drive capacity out of the box. I don't know how much that's going to cost, but it's disappointing. And then I think the biggest thing that disappointed me is that, you know, they've come out with this really beautiful monitor to go with it. I don't need any monitors, but the fact that the monitor that they're releasing is $5,000 and it comes without a stand, and if you just want the piece of metal that holds it up off your desk, it's an extra $1,000, kind of tells me who they're really targeting some of this stuff towards. And I think it's, you know, it's towards a group of people that have it because they can afford it. And I was just hoping for something that was a little bit more of a modular workhorse for someone like me that could start at a base configuration that was reasonable and be upgraded over time. So it leaves me as a Mac user in search of a new desktop computer that isn't integrated into a screen and sealed into a small space so that I can't upgrade it, without a whole lot of choice. You know, do I stick with Mac? Do I move to PC? I don't have to go anywhere right now because my Mac Pro from 2013 is still working. That's a testament to that. I know it was kind of a flop, probably from Mac's perspective. Not a lot of people really bought into that system, but it's really worked well for me for what I've needed to do with it. I'm still happy with it, but I guess the bottom line is I won't be jumping to pre-order the new 2019 Mac Pro. I'll sort of see how things go, and maybe I'll test drive some other, I might even check out a PC. I don't know. It's been almost 10 years now since I flipped from PC to Mac. Maybe it's time to jump back to the dark side, so we'll check it out. But anyhow, so thanks everybody for watching. You know, I really want this conversation to keep going, so that the Approaching the Scene is a series of weekly videos that I do that overall I want it to be a conversation and respond to what people want to talk about. So jump in those comments on YouTube, hit me via email. I'm easy to find, and we'll see you next week.